Now I'm going to take the letter N that we designed in the last couple of videos, and I'm going to turn it into a letter R. And so the first thing I have done, I have taken one of my inspirational fonts. This is Bookman or Bookmania. This is a version of Bookman. And I have typed an R and an N. This is another lovely thing to do with your inspirational fonts. I have created outlines and I have ungrouped. I have turned the R a different color. And it's on top of the letter N. So if I move it, you can see that the left stem is exactly the same. It's not always the case that way, but in this case it is. And then we can also use this to kind of gauge, where does the R stop? All right. So I highly recommend using your inspirational fonts in this way. Okay, so we have our letter N. I have actually saved this as a new document, but of course you can always select your shape, hold it down with the Alt Option key and drag off and make a copy. Okay. All right, so here we have our letter N. And of course, the first thing we want to do is figure out where we want to cut this. I'm going to use the line tool. I've been using that a lot lately for this. And let's go ahead and give this a color so we don't lose our line. I'm going to select just the top endpoint here so we can rotate that. Where do you want your R to stop? Okay, once you've decided that, we can select the line, select our N, use the Pathfinder. It is the divide Pathfinder. Here in the layers, you see that it's now a group. We just want this part, so let's drag that out of the group and delete everything else in the group. So there we have the start of our letter R. Of course, it also depends on what your serifs are going to look like. Again, going back to our original or some of our inspirational fonts, you will see that even though Bookman has these very kind of traditional old style serifs, the R, the terminal on the R is a little more rounded. So you do have some flexibility and you can play with that. So you could give this, I could give this the same exact serif as I had down here. I saved that as a template. Of course, if you didn't save it as a template, you could easily duplicate this part of the R, select that part, and use the divide on the Pathfinder to segment that. Ungroup. So once we have this little piece, if you wanted, you could make that. Maybe that's not so common, but there's nothing that says that that you can't do that. Line them up and Pathfinder them together. Some other things we could do. Let's be a little bit more traditional about it. We can take an ellipse, right? We could make, holding down the shift key, of course. We could add a little ball on the end. Maybe that's enough right there, maybe. Or maybe that's just a start. One of the hardest things is to make, these two shapes line up perfectly smooth. The easiest way to do that is to take this circle, and let's go ahead and change the color. The easiest way to make that is to bring this forward and backward. Now maybe you do want a little, a little bulbous on the end. I'm going to try to make that as smooth as possible. All right, okay. We can Pathfinder those together. Since the gray ball was on top, the whole letter turned gray. Some other things we can do. Let's go ahead and make this smoother. And there's several ways to do that. I'm going to select our shape with the white arrow. Just because it's here, let's see if we can do something with that. Okay, that's not working in this particular case. Another lovely thing we could do is there is a smooth tool. It's hiding under the pencil. So the pencil is the letter N on the keyboard. If we hit N, we go to the pencil, and then hiding under the pencil is the smooth tool. So we can just kind of wiggle around there, and we can smooth that line out. Some other things we can do. Let's undo that. We could use the you can see we have an extra palette here. Let's see if that works. Once we have the smooth tool, but I think, let's see, that's going to change the whole letter. Let's try to just select the end, get the smooth tool, and use the smooth tool slider. So a lot of these, some of these tricks might work for one area and not for another. The other way we can do it, let's click this anchor point, and we can get the convert anchor point. And we can grab the Bezier handles and smooth that. Click off of it. Now we also, for the letter R, we might want to come to this other side and select this point and thin that out even more. Of course, if we thin it too much, you see what happens here, but let's thin that. And then we can always move this. So the moral of the story is you're never moving just one point. We can maybe move this one down a little bit. And probably the other moral of the story is the more you scrutinize it, sometimes you overwork things. So sometimes we might need to save this letter and move on to another letter and then come back to it. Or we might have to come back to our, right, if I'm thinking mine looks too bulbous, I can come back to some of my inspirational fonts and say, wow, this is even more bulbous than mine was. So don't worry about overworking it. Sometimes you just need to put it down and come back to it. All right. But that's the technique.